You know when you discover something and of course it's totally unexpected because it's a discovery. And what you don't expect is that the discovery will change your life completely. Before that moment of encounter, your life was relatively neat and comparatively packaged for you. And then you see something unexpectedly, a lightning bolt out of the blue. And then your life changes forever. This is a Rush album, Permanent Waves. It's the one album that I don't have on compact disc or iTunes. I saw it at a thrift store, kind of like a antique shop, but low grade. So it was just kind of like I don't know, a corner market. I didn't buy the poster at first, the album at first, but it trickled in my mind over the days and I decided to go back to it. I didn't know why I initially opposed the idea of purchasing it. It's relatively cheap. I don't have a record player. I was going to use it as a poster, which is why I said poster. But when I returned to the thrift shop, and I picked up the album, I thought that it was going to be one of those motivational things, to see my favorite band, to see their album, and the three band members on the back, Neil Peart, Geddy Lee, and Alex Lifeson in the studio creating this album. But after I picked up the album and looked at it closely, I realized something. That's my mother. And that guy that you can barely see in the background, that's probably my father too. It's hard to make him out, he's so small. So I'm not sure whether that's my father, but that is definitely my mother. And I was abandoned when I was a baby, and I never met my parents. I just saw one photo of them, one of those classic photos of newlyweds. The man in back with his arms around the woman, husband and wife. That looks like him. And knowing what I know about myself, I can easily extrapolate and believe that he's saying farewell to her, just as she's saying farewell to him. The masculine and feminine inside myself have that uneasy tension. One is always bidding farewell to the other. This guy looks happy, she looks happy, but you know they're going to get back together, but they don't. So imagine being in a thrift store and seeing your mother on the cover of a Rush album, and how that would change your life forever. And now it's absolutely abundantly clear what happened. My favorite band, Neil Peart, Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, that's drummer, lead singer, and bassist, and guitarist and back vocalist. Neil Peart is the lyricist as well. They abducted my mother from me. This is about the time when this album cover was made. This is about the time that they went missing. So they took both of my parents from me and used them create an album cover. So my question is, why weren't they given back to me? Well, I don't know if you can see this, but if you look closely, that is a wave. That is a wave too. And this wave is about to engulf this man, and this wave is perhaps going to engulf her. And then there's water all along here, so we're talking, these are the permanent waves. Although I'm sure Neil Peart had a deeper meaning, because he always does. He's a consummate lyricist and extraordinary philosophical intellect. So it's clear that after my favorite band of all time abducted my parents and left me stranded in an orphanage as a child, they used my two parents for an album cover. And then, shortly after this album cover was shot, captured on photograph, the waves consumed my parents. I mean, I'm happy to know that they were happy in their final moments. The masculine and feminine in perfect détente, or détente, excuse me. A truce, uneasy but ecstatic, between my father and my mother. Mutually parting waves. She's happy, he's happily waving. Permanently waving. On the cover of an album before the waves permanently enclose them. An agonizing, drowning death. And to think I went my whole life until now not knowing the fate of my parents. And perhaps this is why I passed up on buying the album initially, and perhaps this is why I didn't own it until now. I wasn't ready for this truth. It's kind of like the Oracle says to Neo in Matrix Reloaded. He goes, well, why didn't you tell me before? And she says, well, you know why. You weren't ready. And then he says, well, now I'm ready. I'm ready to know the following answers to the following questions. And he asks away, and he gets his gnosis, his knowledge. So I want to know why I didn't know that my parents were engulfed by waves and drowned to death just for the sake of a Rush album cover, and I was left desolate in an orphanage. My whole life, I hadn't even looked. I haven't even looked at the truth. No wonder I was drawn to Rush all these years. No wonder. They drew me along with their melodies and their harmonies. And they're just kick-ass rock and roll. It dawned on me earlier today why I became so lost. Why I couldn't see the details. Why I waited so long for the answers that my soul longed for. Answers to the questions that besieged me from the earliest days of my life. As I was thinking about this today, over breakfast, and I was thinking about how I was going to explain this circumstance to you. Circumstances is another Rush song off their Hemispheres album. I was drinking some coffee that I shouldn't have been drinking. It is a Columbia blend. I like the Arabica blend. And so I had to, normally I drink my Arabica black, but the Columbia blend was, Colombian blend was the only one available at the moment, so I sweetened it with almond milk and I softened it with half and half, and then I threw some honey in there. When I had removed the lid to the half and half, and I removed the lid to the almond milk, this is what happened. These are identical. When I was sitting there drinking my coffee and looking at these identical lids, I was at an impasse, a true dilemma, horns of a dilemma. Which one goes on which one? Because I had forgotten. I wasn't paying attention. When I took them off, the half and half and I took them off the almond milk, I wasn't paying attention as to which one would go back on which. You know? I just threw them on the tabletop simultaneously, and then I looked back and I was like, what is the right one for the right one? Another example. Unfortunately, I can't give you a great illustration of what I mean, considering the fact that this glass is now defrosted and the predicament surrounds the frosting of the glass in a freezer. I like to drink my beer in a glass that is frozen. Now, for the longest time, I would wash the glass and then put it immediately in the freezer. Now, I could have just let the glass dry on the dish rack, but I didn't want to do that for whatever reasons. I just want to be done with it. You know how you just want to be done with things. So what I would do is I would put this in the freezer right after I was done washing it, and the water would go down the sides and then drip along the bottom and then just freeze there, which would, when you put it down, tilt the beer glass. And when you put beer in it and it's tilted, it could obviously fall over easily and spill the beer. Well, I got distracted by that, which is a real, issue. And just recently I discovered to put it upside down. See, you can see it dripping. Now it's upside down in the freezer. And then what I wanted to show you, but it's gone now, I'm sorry. It's taken a while to get this video started. Is that there are little bubbles that are frozen here, bumps, which is the water that comes down and freezes. So you see that the water comes down to the bottom and freezes. And then I'm like, ooh, I'm drinking it and there's bubbles on the rim. Now, in conventional parlance and in postmodern lingua, this is a first world problem, but it is nonetheless a problem. There's always problems. I was reflecting on that earlier. There's always a problem with respect to existence. It's a question then of, do we accept that there's always a problem and therefore make a problem of the problematicity of life? Or do we accept that there are problems and not make problems about the fact that there are problems? Anyways, you can see that I have a slightly autistic dimension to my personality that gets caught in these rather pejoratively labeled conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder. But look at it very carefully. This is my mother. This is my father. This is a permanent wave seeking to permanently engulf them. And he is permanently waving as this permanent wave is going to engulf him. The masculine and feminine, forever divorced, happily divorced. That is the nature of the masculine core and the feminine shell of my very body mind. The detente. How can I more profoundly liquefy the polarity within me so that these two guys are back together again, my mother and father, and I leave the orphanage and the water washes through the town, but a benevolent tsunami that takes no one with it and simply cleanses the town of all its superfluous pathology, but takes no life. So you can see why I would be autistic or ACD or what OCD, not ACDC. I love them. That's another recording. As soon as I find another album cover, I'll tell you what happened there. I have been avoiding this album cover my whole life without even knowing it. That's why I'm so fucking obsessed with these guys. And this guy. I'm so obsessed with details that remove me from a primary cognizance of the most significant elements of reality. Constantly. And I know you can relate. This isn't idiosyncratic to me. Think of all the most vital and life-changing elements of your existence that you fundamentally abhor and ostracize, marginalize, keep on the circumference of consciousness so that you cannot see the album covers right in front of you. And you know, if you're lucky, you'll circle back to that album cover. Think of your favorite band. Think of what's on the front of your favorite album of your favorite band, or maybe of the album that you haven't purchased yet. Find the truth there. You know about these little playful games on Facebook where people say, open a book to page 40. The third paragraph, second sentence describes your life. Well, that's not terribly far-fetched, don't you think? Don't you think that we have the capacity to extract meaning from every occasion? Now, in your case, it may not be as literal as your mother and father abandoning you in an orphanage when you were a child. It may not be that specific or that particular a case. But you know what I'm getting at. That sense of abandonment, where you refuse to become intimate with your estrangement because you are addicted to superfluous details. You are OCD, so to speak, ADD, whatever these bullshit psychiatric diagnoses would have you be. So you cannot stay so perfectly in touch with the album cover you have yet to discover. It's so important that you listen to me now. That even though you don't listen to vinyl anymore, you're going to start listening to vinyl today. Because in that record is a record of all the things you have yet to discover.